of You're All Right Power Session. I'm your host, Darian and Ray, and this is my co-host, Ray Clark.
Happy to be here.
Today we're going to talk about suicide. Pretty much understanding suicide prevention, things of that nature. With all that said, Ray, what you got?
Today we have a returning guest, Stephanie Bradley Blue, who's a licensed clinical therapist. And we also have Karen Caddell, who works with United States veterans for veteran support once they leave the military. Again, like he said, we're going to be talking about suicide prevention. And I think I'm going to let you start off, Darian, and then we'll see what way we want to go with our esteemed panel here today.
Exactly. So one thing I've always found out when dealing with suicide is a lot of people feel like that it can't happen to them. With that said, Karen, what's one of the things that comes across your desk that when you get in contact with people, are they on that same page, and how do you work them past that?
I'd say majority of our males have that ego that they had to be tough, they have to be strong. The military breeds that into you, we're warriors. Something comes our way, we just move on. So it's taking the time to sit back and reflect and process what we have experienced, and it being okay to start processing what they've smothered over their time in the service.
Okay. What about you, Steph?
Well, you know me, I try to look up a little statistics and kind of give some background even to it all, but like the CDC was saying that in 2020, 42.7% of people, it was the number 9 cause of death in this country was suicide. Number nine cause of death in this country during that time. And that, 42.7% of suicides are committed between the ages of 24 and 65. So, like, late youth into seniordom, people are committing suicide, at a very high rate in this country. So, like she said, and the majority of them are men. So we have to be aware of that fact, being able to move through our emotions and move through things in a healthy way. And culturally, we've not always taught people a way to do that. And so
that brings something to mind, because prior to us starting the show today, Karen and I were talking a little bit beforehand, and you're mentioning stats which deal with demographics. Mm-hmm. Now, Karen, can you just let the crowd know, or rather our audience know, what is it that we were discussing in terms of something that was said to you in reference to black and white when it came to demographics, or the idea of suicide in certain communities?
So a few years back, I was sitting in a church group and we were having a heart-to-heart, and one of the ladies mentioned she struggled with suicidal ideations and almost took her life at one point in time, but her family said, no, that's what white people do. Black people don't do that. And I was alarmed to see that we even had the racial breakdown of white people only do suicide. And I was unaware, but you look at how people grow up, what they're exposed to, what they're raised to, and that's what we got back on the subject of churches and upbringings and why people feel that way.
Yeah, I think what I was saying when she mentioned that, and I want you to speak to this as well, Stephanie, is that I said a lot of times you would hear things like, well, you got to give it to God. And they wouldn't necessarily say you can't go get counseling, but it wasn't promoted that counseling or seeing a psychiatrist or therapist, whatever title you want to give to it, it was never pushed as being something that I guess black people should do. We should be, our counselor is Jesus. Mm-hmm. So I want you to talk about that perspective, because you can do both.
Well, let me just clear this up too. Historically and statistically, right, there is a difference and a disparity between cultural groups and their committing suicide. And among that disparity, there tends to be more on the end of white American, and then behind that would be Native Americans. And we fall somewhere shorter in that. I agree, however, that those very ideas of not being in therapy or not being encouraged to talk things out in a healthy space, and that religion oftentimes was supposed to replace your ability to process information, process your emotions, and speak honestly about things. Mm-hmm. Those things definitely happen culturally for us. But I think even greater than that, right, is that same shame that we put on any mental health issue is the shame we put on, like, you can't commit suicide, like, you can't kill yourself, like, that's just not what you're gonna do, because we strong and we can do anything. You know what I mean? So I think it's more from that space of shame.
Right.
You know, shame in general. Like
Right.
the shame that we carry as a culture.
So it's like ashamed to even admit that you need help.
Yeah, shame you need help, shame that you're depressed, shame that you even thought about wanting to hurt yourself. Like, you're not. So I think a lot of it just is out of the fear of, I can't have nobody think that I was thinking that, so I definitely can't have, you know what I mean? So
It's scared to ask for help.
Yeah, so you don't want to ask for help or anything. So that shame factor, right, and that guilt, because that's what we use religion for often, right? Take it to Jesus, because if you can't take it to Jesus, then you know you're a bad person. You know what I'm saying?
Say that again.
You know, if you can't take it to Jesus, then you're a bad person. You know, and that's a shame tactic. That's a guilt tactic.
It's the appearance of being weak, and so a lot of people don't like the to appear weak, so they don't want to come out with the truth. They always say what they never would do. I would like to talk that with out there with the audience of stop saying what you never do. There's a lot of, when we grown here, there's a lot of people out there that always say that they will never do certain things, and then you wind up doing it again. How many of y'all said you would never drink again after you woke up with that hangover? And you drink again that Friday night. How many of y'all said you would never eat that cake again because you got that headache, that diabetes hit again, and you went back to that sugar? You know what I'm saying? How many of y'all said, let's make it even more personal? How many of y'all said you would never have sex with that person again, and you had sex the next day? So stop saying what you're never gonna do. This is a serious topic. It really is. It really is. It really is. And stop. And if your family comes to you with this, don't just brush it to the side and act like, or be scared because you don't want to be embarrassed with your surroundings. All right, you need to get them help immediately, whether it's taking them to the hospital or therapist, whatever it is, but get them help immediately. What are some of the other things that you've seen? Anyone to go?
I think one of the hardest things is suicide goes against the religion, they say. So then they are completely ashamed. They don't want to come out because it is against the religion. So if you can't turn towards your family and you can't turn towards your church, then what are your coping mechanisms?
Yeah.
And then we fall back to destructive behaviors because we try to fix it ourselves, and then it's just a downhill slope from there, and there's no support to help people. I mean, if we're taught our strength is supposed to be in our church and our family, and our family's against it.
Yeah, I understand that. But with that said, as far as the church thing, God could be working through that doctor. God could be working through that therapist. He is.
Yeah.
So give it to God. Yes. Also, when that person come around to help, that's God's way of I sent that person to you for a reason. Young man, young woman, or older man, older woman. So because this hits all ages, all genders, all demographics. Depression is serious. Stress is serious. All right, so and that's one thing that we can't keep on just putting to the waistline like it's never going to happen.
I know that we don't want to leave out any group, but I kind of for one moment want to focus on teen suicide.
Right, it's
Especially
rapid
during,
right now.
During this, we keep having to mention it, COVID. What have you guys seen as far as the numbers or statistics of teen suicide during this time? Because a lot of kids were isolated for a period of time, or they couldn't socialize like they normally would, or they didn't have their prom, or they didn't have their graduation. A lot of things were taken away from all of us, but the kids, some of their one-time moments that you don't get to relive were taken away.
Right.
So what are you seeing with the youth? And I mean people, when I say youth, I'm talking early 20s and down.
I
Yeah.
planned my first funeral for a 14-year-old during COVID who took his life because he was on the spectrum. He was isolated. He wasn't going to school. He was stuck in the house, and he had enough struggles internally. He'd gone to his mom, but it took so long to get to the doctors. He had an appointment the next week. He had everything lined up, and he left his letter, explained it all, but I mean, it was the being stuck in the house, being stuck with no one, having no support. And those he reached out to, being other young men, didn't know what to do for him. They
Right.
didn't catch the signs when he said, hey, I'm going through something, it's emotional right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my personal experience with
And this was
COVID.
a 14-year-old.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that definitely, was an increase during that time. And I think since that time, I think we talked about it last week about, when I was talking about emotional regulation in general, like, because kids are having such a hard time with that, they're constantly seeking, attention. So even if we don't see people fully carrying out suicide, which I think is a pin right here to go to something you said, fully carrying it out, any gesture, any enunciation, any expression of a person wanting to take their life, in their life, no longer get up tomorrow morning or whatever, should be taken seriously.
Yes.
And I think, even if it's attention seeking, which we often say about our young people, which I think is important to say,
Yes.
20 and under, I see it happen all the time, even in our schools and stuff. Even if it's attention seeking, we can't ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to speak to them. We have to sit them down. We have to go through the process of assessing, at what level they are in their thought process, and we have to provide for them all of the necessary preventative tools that we have in our wheelhouse to make sure that if that thought goes from being an attention-seeking thought to something more serious and severe, that they have the tools that they need to be able to move through it differently. And I think that is really, really key in what we see, happening right now. A lot of our teenagers are just overwhelmed. And their first recourse is to project or to put out there. They'll talk, they'll say, I feel this way, I feel that way. But we need to be more aware of the fact that when they're saying it, like I said, attention-seeking behavior or not, we need to take it serious.
One thing that blows my mind with this
I agree.
is there are even preteens now. They're not even teenagers.
10, 11.
And I can't recall of the exact story, but there was a little girl where I saw something in the news where she took her life and she was only 10 years old. So I immediately go in my own mind, like, what's happening to have someone who's only been alive for a decade to feel like they want to kill themselves? Like, what kind of world are we in, and what kind of situation are these kids in where they're that overwhelmed at 10 years old to even know how
Right.
to kill yourself?
Right.
Oh, they search it on the internet.
I'm about to say everything's at your fingertips.
Yeah, they
nowadays.
search it on the internet, options and ways. Like, that's how we, catch a lot of kids sometimes,
Wow, that's a search.
That's
Yeah,
a search.
you can
That's a
search.
You
search.
can Google that information,
You can
it'll tell you.
Google.
Yeah, you can Google.
Anything.
And this cyberbullying is crazy right now, and it's starting young with these kids. So that's a you never know what was happening. So I don't know exactly what that story is, but I do know that a lot of kids from kindergarten on up, because they I mean, think about it. You see 1-year-olds on their phone. They start on these phones first playing games, and then before you know it, they got their own Facebook, or Instagram. I know for Facebook don't went to the dog age, but they own something. You know what I'm saying? And they researching this, researching that. You can find so much stuff on the internet nowadays. Everything is at your fingertips. That's why, for the most part, you can't tell a kid nothing, because they're like, what are you talking about? I know everything. Everything I want to know is right here. Sometimes they feel like they don't have to live it to experience it. They can just research it. But with that said, what's in your eyes, can you tell the viewers the difference between a suicidal thought and a suicidal ideation?
I mean, I think that they're, well, it depends. So suicidal, you can have thoughts. Like, thoughts are not something we can always control,
Right.
right? We don't control our thoughts. They come from anywhere. Like, you can be sitting and watching a show about suicide and like, what would happen if I killed myself? Like, we have thoughts all the time and we can't control them. And ideation is when that thought is adopted for your own idea. Like, ideation. And so now that thought becomes a little bit more repetitive in your mind. It becomes something that you're thinking about more often than you should. And it's starting to, intrude You know, start to intrude on.
You almost start to plan it.
Right.
So something that's a random thought is not as much a concern as something that's cyclical, and you keep coming back to that
It
thought.
becomes
and-
intrusive.
It's
and
all
picturing
it's
yourself.
all a concern.
It's all a concern.
It's just the ideation is another step towards like, wow, but that's all a concern. You shouldn't even be thinking, contemplating suicide whatsoever.
Right.
It's all a concern. So I will not swipe it that it's not a concern. It's all a concern. If you even have that thought, you should be talking to someone. Off jump.
Off jump.
Off jump.
Yeah, well, a lot of people aren't talking to anyone.
Yes, and
There's
that's the
tons
problem.
of people who have these thoughts.
Yes, and that's
Yeah,
the problem.
Definitely.
That's
you have
about-
anything
or-
that you want to add to that, Karen, as far as like,
It's crazy, nobody's talking to anyone, but 97% of Americans believe suicide's preventable. 97%.
97% will believe what?
Suicide's preventable, but we don't have enough people talking about it to prevent it.
A lot of people probably are in pain and hiding it. And I know that we'll have something for people, if you have thoughts, a number to call, suicide prevention.
We're
that'll
definitely going to put
flash.
that down.
But do you guys know of any local resources, like if a parent that you could tell where they could go to have their child seek help, or where the parent can go seek help for their child?
I think a great group is NAMI, and they do support groups helping. They have them throughout the week. They have them online. They have them in person. They have family support, just helping other people either live with their own mental health issues or supporting their loved ones and getting through it. I think that's a great resource to have, because you can go get that face-to-face, which we often can't find right now, is that face-to-face support, and some people need that. But some people do need the virtual, because it gives them that safe spot to open up to. So I think it's a great resource for parents to use, or any loved ones.
Right. And she said, NAMI, that's the National
Alliance.
Alliance of Mental Illness, correct?
Correct.
Yes,
And I'm
okay.
sure they have a website. If
Yes,
you were
I'm
to
pretty sure they
Google
do. I know a lot of states are starting to have like the suicide number. A lot of them are behind on the curve, but a lot of states have already put that number out. So definitely look up the number that's in your state right now, and when you call, that someone is actually answering the phone and pointing you in the right direction. So I know that was something big that they did put into action.
Now I want to, and this is for anyone on the panel, no one has to answer this, but do any of you want to share a story where you know of someone who's taken their lives? Not necessarily giving their names, but scenario of like what kind of situation triggered them. Do you believe, like if they've left a suicide note or things like that? And the reason why I say this is because some people are oblivious to what's going on with their loved ones. You know, there are red flags that people just don't see and ignore.
I say a lot of the red flags are they whole personality change. So if you get someone who's high strung, always excited, full of life, joking around all the time, and all of a sudden they just do a 180, they over there quiet, sad, depressed, something's seriously going on with that person. If they suddenly start giving away things that they love. So if you got someone, you have someone who loves, I don't know, the whatever game system, and all of a sudden they just come and give it to you one day and say, you can have this. And you're like, you gonna give me the game? What, you buy another one? Nah, I just have no need for it anymore. That should be a reason to pause right there. You know, why are you giving me the game system? You know, I've heard of a person said someone came and gave them their car. You can have my car. And they just took the car. And they didn't even think nothing was of it. Yeah, they found, and that part wound up killing themselves. It's like, I think 48 hours later.
Wow.
So,
they
but
went through with it.
yeah, so they went through with it. I had this when I was in the military. I had someone who actually came and said, if you guys care about me, you would call this number. The person who was on duty just put the number to the side. Next day, we did a roll call. Where's this person at? No one knew nothing about this until the person found the note on the CQ desk and was like, what's this? Called a NCO who's at the desk last night. He said, I was half asleep. Some guy came in here and said, if you care about me, you'll call the number. I ain't worried about it. He's like, what are you talking about? So they ended up calling the number. The number was to a hotel. We went to the hotel. It was late. He hung himself in the shower. So there's different things. So you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. Another thing, we always out here saying it's a selfish act. That's not the mentality of the person who's committing suicide. The mentality of the person who's committing suicide is not thinking that's selfish. They thinking that I'm relieving you of your stress because I'm holding you back. You know, I'm stressing you out. I'm sick. I'm going through this. I'm depressed. Whatever it is, I'm more of a what's the lack of a better word?
Burden?
Yeah, I'm more of a burden on you. So by me taking my own life, I release you of that stress myself. So that's the mentality that they have.
But even like with the young man that you were saying that they say if someone cares, they'll call this number.
Yes.
Oftentimes, two people are seeking to be seen, like
Yes.
to be heard.
He wanted.
Right. He wants somebody to say, "I care about you."
Yes.
So that's somebody who is feeling isolated, alone. So selfishness is not, the first thing for us to think. We think that the act itself, and oftentimes the surviving persons feel that way.
Yes.
Because they were like, well, they weren't thinking about what they meant to us. But if I'm asking you to show me what I mean,
Exactly.
and you don't show me what I mean,
Then you
how
didn't
can I perceive that my presence is important?
Exactly. You answered my question.
Right. And so I think oftentimes we have to consider that with our loved ones. I know for me personally, my personal experience as a parent is just knowing your children and understanding who they are and their, the way that they tend to express themselves. And I was here at one time, and one of my children was struggling, and I had to call my sister and say, go to the house and make sure he gets where he needs to be. I was, 300 miles away, but I thank God for family and the fact that I didn't take it lightly. What I heard, I didn't take lightly, and I put people in action, and they moved into place. And I was grateful because as a result, of course, he was able to get the help that he needed and support that he needed. But we don't always, because the first thing we want to do as parents sometimes is to feel guilty, like what didn't I do right, or this cannot be happening. You got to get yourself out of that space, and you got to realize that it's not personal to you. This person is just they're in a bad space, and you don't know what those reasons are, and all those reasons don't have to necessarily do with you.
Right.
But be willing to say, I'm going to get the help that I need.
Right. And talking to auntie and grandma sometimes is not the answer. Sometimes they need to find professional help. I lost a brother to suicide, so that was my first ever close encounter. It messed me up. It was my favorite brother, and he was one of those ones that was the life of the party. I named my son after him. He was one of the ones that was the life of the party. So it does hit home a lot, and I say that to say this. He was thousands of miles away, off to himself when this happened. So he wasn't around family, things of that nature. But even when his friends came to the funeral, they said the same thing. Hey man, listen, he was always happy, always the life of the party. We didn't think nothing was wrong with him, right? And around that time, he was the same way. So they didn't think nothing was wrong with him. I had a soldier that was in the military. He wasn't my personal soldier, but I remember in a situation where he just disappeared. We were all looking for him. We finally tracked him down. We went to his mother's house, and his mom said, the way he left, we knew something was wrong. And he always loved Disney World. So, we put out maybe about 100-mile radius perimeter thing looking for him, looking at all the hotels, things of that nature. But by the time we got to Disney World, it was too late. They actually found him at an urgent care. So he actually pulled up to the urgent care in his car. So in our minds, one last thought process of going in there for help before he just took his life outside in that car. But when they searched his car, searched the room he was in, he did go to Disney World one last time. Just like his mother said, mother knows his child. He went to Disney World one last time. And he was on cloud 9 right before his death. And that's a lot thing. So just because your loved one is depressed at this time, and then all of a sudden they start feeling good on cloud nine. They start, they're always happy. You do not take your foot off that pedal. Sometimes they're happy because they already came up with the timeline and exactly that they're going to take their life. They already know, and they're already content with it. So that's when you pay them even more attention. All right, that's when you pay them even more attention, because that's what he did, that's what my brother did, and that's what a lot of people was. If they was here, and then they probably say the same type of things. Oh, wow, he or she was smiling ear to ear. What's going on? I don't know.
Acceptance is a strong thing.
Exactly.
Acceptance is a powerful thing. And when you accept that this is it for me, or this is where I'm going to be, people who commit and complete suicide are resolute. They use resolute means, gun, hanging, slicing up the wrist. Like, they're very resolute. They know
They take the nuclear option, something that you definitely.
This is what I'm going to do, and
Facts.
it's not going to be hours later. Somebody might come find me, and rescue me. They're very resolute, and once they come to that place of acceptance, like you said, that's definitely a crisis. We're now in crisis. We're in a mental health crisis, and you need to operate and function and move on that in a crisis way. And I want to address this because I think that this is important too, Joel, especially as families, and I don't know if you find this is an issue as well, but when you find somebody in that level of mental health crisis, you can't be worried about whether they're going to be mad at you if you call the crisis police people or if you take them to the hospital. Like, you cannot, if you want them to be living, you need to take drastic measures
Yes.
and do what needs to be done. So that if that means getting them committed and TDOing them because you have a right as a family member to do so,
Let them be upset.
They'll just have to be mad.
Yep.
But at least they'll be mad and alive.
Facts.
And I think we really that was hard. That's hard for us. When we find our family members in mental health crisis and we don't want to do the hard thing, which is, get the authorities involved, get the courts involved. This person is not capable of making their own decisions right now. And we need to take over for that person and do what needs to be done in order for them to live and then have to see their lives differently, because they're in a crisis. And we don't always understand what that looks like. If a person becomes resolute about killing themselves, that their behavior, like you said, becomes manic. It's all kinds of signs that start to come out. We're not talking games now.
Right.
I want to know, Karen, if you want to add anything else, because we're about to wrap it up. In summary here, we're approaching our time, but I want to give you the last word to you, and then back to you.
I think what you just said makes a lot of sense, and one of the things I always drive home, especially with my son's friends, is that's not okay to talk like that, and if that's heard, I am calling an ambulance, and you will get picked up.
Yes.
And the more we start holding our teens accountable, and we start calling the ambulance, we start calling and reporting things, this attention seeking of saying this, I'm going to commit suicide, I want to end my life, it might get under control. It will be bad, it will be frustrating, it will be hard, it'll be difficult to call an ambulance and have someone's kids taken or your own kids taken and go through the psych evaluation, but it will be life-changing for that individual, and it could save their life and so many more if we start actually addressing it instead of just sweeping it under the rug.
I agree. I think we need to have more conversations like this. I think these type of things need to be going on in the high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. I think teachers, parents need to be going through this training as well, so they know what to be what it looks like, what to be aware of, the signs, things of that nature, and stop being so engulfed into your own life. Some people they have that out of sight, out of mind attitude. They have that selfishness to them. Pay attention to your kids out there, because I promise you, a lot of them are giving you signs. You know what I'm saying? They are giving you signs. So every now and then it does happen without a sign, because it's boom. All right. That's why they're saying you shouldn't have. That's why a lot of people say you shouldn't have a gun in the house, because boom, you can't take that quick split second away. But a lot of the times they actually think about it for a good weeks months before they actually follow through with it. And sometimes
time is when they need you the most.
Yes, and that's time and they do ask that person. That person, when after they're gone, there's people who come out and say, he did say this to me. She did say this. They did give signs. It's just that were we paying close enough attention to them? Listen, we're gonna put some numbers and some information below. Definitely, you are worth something. You, your life does make a difference. You got great things ahead of you, and taking your life should not be the result. All right, I guarantee you have nothing but love around you, and if you don't, please get out there and get some help as soon as possible.
I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today. And like we always say, it's about the community.
Definitely,
When it comes to suicide prevention, you can't worry about if they're mad at you. It's about whatever it takes.
definitely. You guys have a good one.